When God created man, he made it possible for him to seek him. In Genesis chapter 1, verse number 26 and 27. Now, everything that I have read and studied on this particular text, and believe me, there are varying interpretations of what Genesis chapter 1, verse number 26 and 27 means. However, everything that I have studied on these verses suggests that it is safe to say when God made mankind, listen to me closely, he stamped his character, his moral attributes in our conscience. And I want you to follow me on this because it gets a little bit tenuous. So God stamped his character, his moral attributes in the conscience of his human creation. The Bible describes it as his image and his likeness. When we talk about the conscience, we are talking about that inner voice that acts as a guide to the rightness or the wrongness of one's behavior. As young as we can possibly remember, our conscience informed us literally not to do this and to do this. I recall even as a youngster myself watching my mother at the stove with four flames on the top of the stove cooking and being fascinated with the fire. You know how that is. You see something that you're not really aware of what it means, and you just want to find out what it's like. And I would walk near the stove, and my mother would just, with her foot, push me away and say, "Hot, stay away." She didn't give me the explanation, probably wouldn't have made a difference anyhow. But the bottom line is this. She kept on telling me, "Stay back, it's hot." However, when she walked away from the stove for a second, I'd walk up to the stove and touch the stove and experience the consequences. Our conscience is aware of right and wrong. We're not talking about full-blown awareness. We're talking about how our conscience helps us to understand the difference between right and wrong. In God's desire, then, to draw us into a personal relationship with him through common grace. In other words, the conscience is a gift from God to all human beings. And that is called theologically as common grace. When God does something for everybody. The sun shines for everybody on good and evil, common grace. Rain falls on everybody for the welfare of agriculture, common grace that comes from God. Our conscience, our capacity to be guided by the character, the moral attributes of God for our safety, for our well-being, is a gift that comes from God. However, even though we have the choice, we can decide out of freedom, we can decide to do what is right and what is wrong, not realizing the consequences of choosing wrong and the benefits of choosing what is right. We will either move forward to the character of the Creator by doing what is right, or we will progressively move away from the moral character and righteousness of God by doing what is wrong. Thus, learning by experience to submit what is right over time moves man closer and closer to the character or the likeness of our Creator. Now keep in mind, I'm not talking about somebody who is aware of the Scriptures or who is even aware of God. We are talking about activity in the human experience. This process has been designed by God to give us the opportunity to move closer to Him by freedom, also by freedom to decide whether or not we want to move further and further away from God. Be mindful. If we violate our conscience over and over and over, there's no doubt that we are desensitizing ourselves from truth. Anytime we engage in a habit of desensitizing ourselves from the truth, we progress further and further away from God. For example, the first time you do something that is wrong, it's a bit agonizing. You're a little anxious. You're restless. You're not sure what you're going to experience. But then you do it the second time, and you become less anxious, less preoccupied with potential consequences. So you're able to do it a little bit easier that time. But the third time you are willing to take both feet and jump in and do exactly what you want to do. That's what desensitizing ourselves from the truth does to us.